What's up out there? Welcome back to some more Melvor Idle, and today we're going to talk about ranged gear progression for the base game. Now, this is a follow-up to the melee guide, and this actually kind of builds on that guide in a lot of ways because personally, I build my melee character first and then equip ranged weapon and build ranged off of the melee gear. And the reason for that is because the melee gear has the damage reduction already on it. And it takes a while before you get better ranged gear. You have to be like level 40 before you can get into the dragon gear, the dragon hide gear. But you can fill in all those gaps with the melee gear because if you get it and upgrade it and have all the damage reduction on that, there's no penalties for it. You're just not going to get any bonuses for the range side of things. So let's dive into this. First and foremost, I will point this out on every video. There's a wiki button down here. It takes you to a very well done wiki page that has pretty much all the information you could ever want. There's guides, there's information about all the different gear, all kinds of stuff. I recommend that. It's a good resource. Even if you think you know a lot about the game, like I think I know a ton about the game, there's still stuff that you're going to find in there that you just didn't know, or it's a good resource all around. I can't remember where everything comes from. It's just a good resource. So I highly recommend going to that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the monsters that you fight and the way that you play ranged in some regards. This is more focused on the gear side of things, but there are ways that what you fight affects what you're doing. And I want to talk about that real quick. So like I said, I typically build up my range character after I've worked on my melee character. There are times you can do that in a different way, but typically that's what you're going to want to do. So you're not going to get ranged bonuses from the melee gear, but you will get the damage reduction. So that's why you do that. One thing that we're going to talk about fighting through some monsters here, I would recommend that you at least have a 60 to 70% chance to kill a monster or to hit a monster before you move up to that monster. You're going to start with plants no matter what. Everybody starts with plants because they're the easiest thing to hit. They have they have the lowest damage. They have the lowest hit points. They're the lowest combat rating. Like they're just the easiest target. So no matter what style you're going to start with, you're going to start there. And even then you're only going to have like a 30 or 40% chance to hit. So it's going to really suck for a long time. But once you can get up to 60 to 70% chance to hit a monster, then you want to move forward. And so like, I would not start with chickens or cows or junior farmers or any of that until you can get a 60 to 70% chance to hit them, somewhere in there. So idle on plants for a very long time and then move up to the next one once you can. And we're going to go over some of that here in a second. But if you idle on things that you only have like a 20 or 30% chance to hit with, you're wasting a lot of ammo, and your XP gains are based on how much damage you do. So if you're missing constantly and you only hit once in a while for a little bit of damage, it's going to take far longer to level up. So you want to attack something that you have more chance to hit than something that you have less chance to hit. The other thing you want to do is move up as you can. You want something with a nice health pool on it. Like these only have 20 hit points. If you're doing 100 damage, you want to move up to a creature you can hit for 100 damage because you're going to get more XP off of it than you will off the little piddly creature. So there's definite reasons to move forward. But you will have to idle on the weaker stuff for the most part, for a while anyway. And then to do long sessions, you want to be able to receive the damage, which is damage reduction. You want to have plenty of food. You want to have plenty of prayer points, that kind of thing, because it's just going to make your sessions longer and you're going to be more effective because you're going to be doing more damage. You're not going to be taking as much, not burning as much food, burning as many arrows, things like that. So do as much damage as possible and be able to spend as much time as possible. Now, you want to follow the combat triangle. So melee is strong against ranged, but range is strong against magic. So you're going to want to focus on magic stuff as much as possible. But when we get into the monsters here in a second, you're going to find that a lot of these are melee because there's not very many options very early in the game. So we're going to want to focus on weak creatures first and then magic stuff later. And speaking of the monsters, let's talk about those. I typically start with plants on everything, whether it's melee, magic, or ranged. I start with plants. They're the easiest thing to hit and kill. You can get a lot of levels off of this, 20, 30 levels. Like you can just let it sit and go for a few hours and then come check it. When I move over, I typically, now melee is a little different. I probably go up through like chickens and cows because I don't have the gear to really bust forward unless I have, say, mining and smithing available or something like that. Like if I don't have any of these skills available, depending on combat mode and what, or depending on game mode and things like that, I may not have these skills available. But I typically try to work through what gear I can equip, and the better the gear I can equip, the thicker the monster I can fight. But again, you want to stay in that 60 to 70% chance to land a shot because that's going to give you more XP. So putting that into practice, I would kill plants to begin with, and then I would typically switch over to tentacles and giant crabs because these have giant health pools. These have good health pools. This one's 250 health points, and this one has 600. So you're going to be able to hit those for 100, 200 damage and do decent chunks of damage to gain the XP. And I think if you go into the wiki, they recommend this. I picked this up a long time ago, maybe off Reddit, I don't remember, but these two right here, tentacles and giant crabs, are good to idle on for a fairly long time. Level 40, 50, somewhere in there, 30, 40, something like that. I don't really have a good hard fast number because you just want to get it to where you can go to the next creature that you want to kill. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is all melee though. So the problem is you're going to run into stuff that you just can't kill. All of this stuff in here is basically melee or ranged. There's not much in here aside from these three monsters in the Wizard Tower and this one down here in the Ellerin Battlegrounds. Otherwise, everything's ranged in melee. So what I typically do is go through the plants and then go over to tentacles, giant crabs, and once I can reliably idle it, I switch over to the Hall of Wizards and just let that ride on out. There's not really any other reason or really any other creature to idle on with your ranged character. There is stuff in the Slayer areas, there's stuff in the Holy Isles, but these don't really drop anything useful unless you're trying to build up your magic character. You can certainly go in and attack these, but I go right for the throat basically, because with the Hall of Wizards, you're going to get some, I think these are level 20, 30, something like that, magic gear, all the way up to the ancient magic gear. And if you let it idle out far enough to hit level 85 ranged, you will have 800-900 of these chests to open up somewhere. You'll have several hundred chests to open up. And that means lots of potential to get the ancient wizard gear. And once you've got that gear, you can, especially once you get, I'm at my adventure account, I'm at this point right now. I can equip this blue and red stuff, and then I have the ancient gear ready to go. So that's typically how I route through this. And then once you get to level 85, keep in mind, you're also going to be working on your melee character at the same time. So I get my melee character where I can go through the volcanic cave and get a clear on the air god dungeon. And the reason you want ranged at 85 is because the air god gear takes level 85 ranged. So once I can clear the air god dungeon, which is where I'm at with my adventure account, I can now equip the ranged gear that I get out of this onto my melee character and use that for its damage reduction so that I clear this dungeon easier. I won't get bonuses off of it, but I will get better gear to idle the air god dungeon with, and then even go back to the volcanic cave and idle that, a little bit more with that because it's better damage reduction gear. All on the alternative side, or on the flip side, you can then equip your all that air god gear and go through the water god dungeon and level up from 85 to 99 through the water god dungeon, or 85 to something higher. You're going to spend a lot of time on the water god dungeon to get the pet and all the weapons and stuff for your magic side anyway, so you can idle this for a little while. From there, you're going to want to idle the fire god dungeon with ranged, because the final boss is a magic boss and that works best there. And then once you get through that, you're going to be working to get to Into the Mist, and of course ultimately to Impending Darkness, and both of these have all three combat styles in them, so you're going to need this leveled up. In between, you will come back to the Slayer areas and work with Dark Waters, fighting Cthulhu's to get the wand for magic, and then you're going to go into the Unhallowed Wasteland and fight the Cursed Liches for the stuff that comes out of there. So pretty much, I don't use ranged a lot, That's kind of where I use it, is just to level it up with the plants and the tentacles and the giant crabs, and then the Hall of Wizards dungeon for the bulk of things, and then the Air God dungeon, and then the final, the last Slayer areas and stuff like that. You can definitely go into some of these other Slayer areas. Like if you wanted to level up off of them, you can certainly do that. Nothing wrong with it. I just don't necessarily bother with it unless I'm working on Slayer tasks and the combat triangle dictates what I need to roll out. But I'm typically trying to get to the Air God stuff first, because that lets all the other gear, or that has me with the best gear that I can equip to go do all the Slayer tasks with and make things much easier on that end. Okay, game modes specifically. Standard and hardcore pretty much are about the same. There's differences. One's got permadeath, and there's other differences to it. But for the most part, as far as gear progression goes, standard and hardcore means you can start with all the gear that you want right out of the gate, because you will have fletching and crafting unlocked. There's no restrictions against it. They're just there. So I would typically start off and equip gem tip bolts, or I would go to gem tip bolts and make topaz bolts. You're going to have probably the mining and smithing or thieving or something to get the parts. You'll definitely need smithing to do the headless bolts. But once you can get to the topaz part of it and start crafting these things up, fletching these up, whatever you want to call it, these you can equip at level 1. Same thing with crossbows. Bronze and iron crossbows are level 1. So you can just start right out of the gate with a shield and go to it with crossbows. I do not recommend bows at all. Long bow, short bow, it doesn't matter. I don't care whether it's the ancient bow or the storm snap or any of that. I typically don't bother with any of them. They don't have damage reduction, and you can have a shield with a crossbow, do more damage, and have damage reduction. So why would I take something that is less? That's just my 2 cents. For me, damage reduction, especially early game, is key. So that's kind of what I go through. If you wanted to idle something with your melee character, you could idle out the ranged Golbins. If you wanted to, say, use the slingshot, get to level 3, equip that, you can go there, and then idle out the bandit hideout. The trainees and the bandits, they drop stuff, and then this bandit base, you can get good stuff there. Spider Force gives you a lot of good stuff for ranged, and of course, the Air God dungeon. Oh, I forgot about the Dragon's Den. This also gives you all the ancient stuff. If you want to equip that, you can certainly do that. If you wanted to step through the various gears and use them as you level up, level 40 gets you this, level 50 gets you that, level 60 gets you that. You can definitely do that, especially if you're doing a completion account. It might be worth stepping through all the different iterations of gear you can get. Otherwise, you can just skip the Dragon's Den and go right into the Air God dungeon. Get the gear out of that and equip it if you're level 85 ranged. Okay, adventure accounts. These are where things start to get different. With adventure accounts, you have to start with melee. You cannot start with ranged at all, and you have to unlock range. So you don't even get fletching or crafting or any of that stuff. So you have to basically buy it. So I would typically run through the bandit hideouts and stuff like that, and then just start saving the arrows that I get. Once I can idle on the bandit base, this stuff is great for leveling up your melee character. And then as a side benefit, you're going to build up a pile of bows and arrows. And I would use bows and arrows in adventure mode, simply because there's probably nothing else you're going to have for a while. So whatever you collect up out of these dungeons and creatures you're going to fight is a good stack to start with. So that's typically what I do with that. Again, they don't have damage reduction on any of the two-handed weapons, so I try to ditch those as soon as possible, which means I may not work on ranged for a while until I get fletching and crafting open, and then I can start, doing a little more with that. It just depends. It's kind of how I feel about doing things. You can also kill ranged Golbins until you get this slingshot. This is level 3 weapon, so you can use the bronze arrows and the short bows, whatever you get from this thing, to equip, get to level 3, and then use the slingshot. It doesn't cost you ammo. It does have some diminishing returns, but for adventure mode or hardcore combat only or something like that, it works pretty good. Gets you fairly far along without having to have a huge pile of arrows sitting there. And then of course, once you get fletching and crafting, you got access to all that gear. And then same thing with what I mentioned earlier. You would typically idle the ranged goblins, the bandit hideout, and then the bandit base, spider forest, and dragon's den, and air god dungeon for all the different gear needs that you have for adventure mode. Now, moving on to hardcore combat only. This is where things get interesting because none of the non-combat skills can be used. They're all locked out. If you get one of the mods for that mode, that's what you're going to get, but you have all the combat modes started out. So pretty much, once again, you're going to want to work on your melee character first, get all the gear that you can, and have as much damage reduction as you can, get it as upgraded as you can, but you're probably going to be a lot slower on this. So instead of being in, say, adamant gear, you're probably going to be in mithril gear, fully upgraded or something like that. And then you can start working on range. Again, I would work on killing off the ranged goblins, get the slingshot, use that for as long as you can on hardcore combat only because it takes 0 ammo. And then, as usual, go through the bandit hideouts and the bandit base, the spider forest, dragon's den, that kind of thing. I've done one speed run hardcore combat only mode. I got fairly far, but I didn't get all the way through it and progress through a whole hardcore combat only. I do want to do that, but my knowledge, basically what I'm saying here is my knowledge on the range side of hardcore combat only is limited to that. The other thing to note with hardcore combat only is the only bolts that you can get come from these Slayer resupplies, which is going to cost you Slayer coin or the Air God dungeon. That's it. That's all you get for bolts. So these Slayer coin places are good drops. These resupplies are really good for bones, for prayers, for food, and for bolts. Definitely helpful, but it costs a lot of Slayer coin. Okay, as far as gear goes, we'll just jump into this thing here. As far as gear itself goes, actually, you know what? We can go over here to crafting. Look at this over here. You have leather gear at level 1. You have hard leather at level 10. Then there's a giant jump over to dragon hide, which is level 40. And blue is 50. Red is 60. Black is 70, I think. And then ancient dragon hide. I don't think I have any. Ancient dragon hide is a little higher than that. I don't remember what level that is, but Ancient Dragon Hide's higher, and your God Gear is at level 85. So the point is, that's why I fill in with all the melee gear is around that, so I can have my damage reduction. But, and then I think it's, once you get up to the red Dragon Hide, I think that's where you start getting the 4% damage reduction, on here. And this 4% is comparable to the Paladin gloves. So you can equip the green or blue Dragon Hide Vambraces, but the red at level 60 gives you the same damage reduction as Paladin gloves. We'll get into Paladin gloves here in a second. But to note that, you have to get all the way up to level 60 range to get the same damage reduction you can get with Paladin gloves much, much quicker. The ranged level itself is not split. Like for melee, it's split between attack, strength, and defense. And your strength dictates how much damage you do. I don't believe that factors into ranged. It may or may not. I don't think so. I think that's more for melee side of things. But where attack and defense define what you can equip as far as a weapon and armor, ranged is all in one. There's nothing split. What level you are ranged is what level weapon and what armor you can equip. So if it's level 40, it's level 40. There's nothing else to match. You can mix and match gear from the other combat styles. Like a lot of the magic gear has damage reduction. Of course, I don't have any of that in here, any of the lower level stuff. But a lot of your magic gear, if you wanted to use this, you could. Like your air magic gear, some of this stuff has damage reduction. You might have to get farther down into it. 4% damage reduction with the adept gear, and then the air expert is 5%, but that's also getting up to level 35 magic. So you can use it, but it's going to take some magic to get there. Let's see here. You generally want the highest damage reduction you can put on. So, like I said, you can mix and match gear. If something has a little bit more damage reduction and you can equip it, by all means, use it. Take advantage of it. But you definitely want the gear for the combat style you have because you're going to get bonuses for it. Otherwise, damage reduction is helpful. Use a shield as much as possible. Ditch those bows and go to a crossbow. There are times later in the game when you might want to lower your damage reduction just slightly to up your DPS. That's late game stuff, so we don't have to worry about that early on. All of your dragon hide stuff upgrades. So if you go into crafting, I don't believe any of the leather stuff does, but all the dragon hide upgrades. So each one of these pieces has an upgrade. You will notice that there is no helmet or gloves. Well, I'm sorry. There's no helmet or boots for any of this. So you're missing 2 pieces of gear, which you have to fill in with something else, whether it's melee gear, melee helmet, melee boots, stuff like that, or just stick with like leather gloves, hard leather boots. There is better stuff out there. Typically, you're going to want the best gear that you can equip, and these are very low level and they suck. So try to switch them out with something else as soon as possible. It's also worth mentioning that the gear that it takes to clear a dungeon is not the same as the gear it takes to idle the dungeon. So moving on to weapons. Personally, as mentioned many times before, I do not bother with bows much anymore. I can use them from time to time, but I typically stick with crossbows. If you have access to fletching, just go right to crossbows. Build your fletching and crafting up to the point where you can use, and your mining and smithing, whatever all you need to get there, get it to where you can start using bolts as soon as possible. You're going to benefit far more from it. The slingshot at Golden level 3 takes no ammo. It's worth mentioning it again and again and again. It's a nice weapon. It gets you so far. It's not going to get you very far, but it gets you so far without taking ammo. So it's definitely worth using. Crossbows, you're going to level 1, you can do bronze and iron. You can equip steel crossbows at level 5, mithrils level 20, adamant's 30, runes 40, and then dragon is at level 60. You can get some from the marauder here. You can get an adamant rune and dragon crossbow if you have thieving open. The thugs, they only drop bows, but you can actually get crossbows here from the marauders if you have thieving. You cannot get any bolts from anywhere except from fletching or the air god dungeon or the Slayer resupplies. Now, as far as bolts go, your gem tip bolts, topaz, you can equip at level 1. They're a little off. Sapphire's level 20. They're off kilter from the crossbow itself. So topaz with level 1, sapphire with level 20, ruby's level 40, emeralds are level 60, and I tend to use emeralds once I can equip them. I'll make 500,000 of them and just use those for a very long time, kill all my trash mobs with. Diamond bolts are good. They're definitely better than the emerald bolts, but they're very expensive and they take a lot of diamonds. These you can equip at level 80 range, so they take a long time to get there. And then the jade bolts come in at level 90. These things are even more rare. You can get a decent source of them in the Perilous Peaks here, killing these hunting dragons. They drop them, but by the time you can idle those things, there's also some township tasks that use them. So it's best to just hang on to those. They trade for good money. You can certainly use them in combat if you want, but there's township tasks and money to be made, and so that's why I typically stop at emerald bolts, and then I might use diamond for a little bit, especially if I'm trying to do a completion account. I build up the diamond bolt pile, and then use those if I have them. For armor itself, you're going to want to follow through the crafting stuff. As we mentioned before, the leather, the hard leather, and then the dragon hide. There is ancient dragon hide that comes from the Dragon's Den. The green, the blue, and the red can all be purchased from the store, and then you can craft it. The black dragon hide comes from black dragons, so you have to kill them. Then you can come in here and craft it and upgrade with their hides and stuff. Ancient dragons aren't even on this list. You have to go kill them from the Dragon's Den, collect up enough dragon hide, and then you can upgrade that stuff. So you will, as I mentioned earlier, it takes all the way down to level 60 before you get 4% damage reduction off of these red dragonhide vambraces. For a much sooner level, you can go in here, and as we found out in previous videos, there is the Turkle Archers. I think it's these things. They drop the Desert Wrappings. That has 2% damage reduction on it, if memory serves correctly. And then the Holy Isles is my favorite because it's got the Paladin with the Paladin Gloves, and those gives you 4% damage reduction. No level requirements of anything, 4% damage reduction right there. Now, with the range side, I would use the Slayer Cowl, probably use some melee boots for a while. There are some other helmets and boots you can use, but they're not great. They don't have any damage reduction. So I would use like leather or hard leather or a Slayer Cowl or melee stuff for the helmet and boots. Now, let's see here. We've already talked about all of this stuff here. Ancient gear has 6% damage reduction. So if you wanted to push into, say, the Water God dungeon without being able to equip Air God gear, you can definitely do that with the Ancient gear. It's a little tougher fight. It takes a little bit more to idle it, but it's doable. Capes. And this is going to be kind of basically the same thing that we talked about in the melee side of things. Any cape you have gives you something. Even, let's use farming skill cape. It gives you a little bit of defense. Doesn't matter how much, it gives you a little bit of defense. So if you have 99 in any skill, you're going to get a little bonus out of it. Your ranged gear might have some ranged bonuses there, but you're probably going to be farther from level 99 with range than you will any other skill. Farming's probably the first skill you'll hit 99 with anyway. But wood cutting, any of those, they all have a little bit of damage reduction. From there is the Obsidian Cape, and that comes from Adamant Knights. That's the next thing you up that you would want to equip. That's this thing here. It gives you a little bit of defense for every ranged or melee level that you have. It has 0 damage reduction, but these bonuses, the defensive bonuses, show up on this. That's the second best thing you can get. Or, I'm sorry, that's the next in line to the best thing you can get. Knight's Cape has 1% damage reduction, comes from thieving. It is down here at the Squires. This has been added. It's a great addition to it. Let's see. The Fire Cape has 2% damage reduction. You get that from beating the Volcanic Cave, and that is over here. This is a really solid entry. It gives you some bonuses, a little bit of attack and defense for everything but magic. But you get some bonuses there. It's good. Comes from the volcano. Now, the one that this is something I found out since the melee video. I never paid attention to it. But this Skull Cape, this thing is a magic cape. It actually has +3 damage reduction. So that's really solid. It's got attack bonuses, and it may give you a negative to some of your other stuff, but that +3% damage reduction will get you into a lot of things. So I might throw that into rotation. It's 400,000 Slayer coin, I think. Yeah, 400,000 Slayer coin. But for 400,000 Slayer coin, if you can save that up, that's 3% damage reduction, which is better than the Volcanic Cave. Not as good as the Infernal Cape. That one is 4% damage reduction, but you can buy your way into 3% damage reduction and then slide that right over to your magic character and use that for a while. And you've kind of helped out all your characters. Again, early game damage reduction is far better than anything else that you're going to get stat-wise. The other stuff helps, but damage reduction is going to be the best. As far as amulets and rings, Silver Diamond Ring, your elite amulet of defense as usual, and the Fury of the Elemental Zodiacs. Now, in the course of researching this, and somebody pointed this out on my melee video, your elite amulet of defense has 2% damage reduction right there. It comes with that. Now, what I did not realize is that the amulet of magic, this thing has 2% damage reduction as well. So if you can slide in there and get one of these elite amulet of magic, that also helps out. I mean, it's going to give bonuses for magic, but it has that 2% damage reduction. So that's also, if you're working towards the Fury of the Elemental Zodiacs, I've only ever used the elite amulet of defense, but the amulet of magic works also. I will also add one thing that I found out too is that the amulet of ranged has 1% damage reduction. It's not as good as the others, but it's got attack and strength bonuses plus a little bit of damage reduction for your ranged character. So all three of those amulets are really good. They can be used interchangeably on the different classes or different styles, combat styles. Make use of those. As far as I know, there's not any other damage reduction amulets until you get Fury of the Elemental Zodiacs. And there is a township task to get multiples of those, so take advantage of that. Now, all the other gear in the game. We've kind of talked very generically about gear. To get into some specifics, there's a whole host of other gear. You know, we've talked about bows and crossbows and slingshots and stuff like that. If we were to look at, say, the Desert Shortbow, no damage reduction. Say the Storm Snap, no damage reduction. I mean, it's a cool bow, no damage reduction. Ancient Longbow, no damage reduction. Ellerin Longbow, no damage reduction. So that's why I skip all those. But we're going to get into, let's see, where are they at? The Sand Treaders. If I can find those in my inventory here, maybe we just type out sand. Oops. These things. These speed up your attack interval, no damage reduction. So I don't bother with these. They're cool. I just don't bother with them. Pratt's hats, bonuses, no damage reduction. Confetti bow from Slayer coin. That's this thing here. This makes you money. It can make you decent money, but again, it doesn't have any damage reduction, but it is a crossbow. It takes level 60 to equip, and it gives you a ton of money. So if you're if you need hardcore combat only, this thing can help make money, but you have level 60 range for it. Cape of Pratt, bonuses, no damage reduction. Ring of Barrage is decent. It's okay, no damage reduction. You can benefit from the expansion amulets and rings. I'm looking forward to my adventure account to see how much advantage you can take of that, but it's there. Ranger boots and Ranger hat. I typically avoid these. They're kind of crappy. I don't even see that I have them on here, and I may not. No, don't have them. So the Ranger boots and the Ranger hat, I think they both give like ranged preservation, so you're not going to lose ammo as much. It gives you a chance to save your ammo. I typically don't bother with them. They don't have any damage reduction, and that's kind of about it. Let's see. There's a whole bunch of stuff we could go through as far as monsters and what drops what. The key takeaways is going to be the Turkle archers drop these desert wrappings. The paladins drop the paladin gloves, so get those collected with your melee side of things, and then you can use them, you know, especially if you can idle those and get multiple copies of them. We've talked about all the other stuff about which dungeons to go to. It's kind of a high-level overview of how I go through a lot of this. There's a lot of minutia we could go into, and there's a lot of time we could spend on what gear gives you what and where and what to equip when, but typically that's what I do. Is if I have the ability to follow fletching and crafting, I go through the bolts and crossbows and go through the leather and dragon hide, go through that realm. You can skip right into the air god if you can and equip that gear, and then you're just going to follow that all the way out to the dungeons that are after that, the dungeons in Slayer areas. So once you go through the air god dungeon, the fire god, into the mist, impending darkness, and then you're out. In between Into the Mist and Impending Darkness is the Dark Waters and the Unhallowed Wasteland. But like I said, you typically want to fight anything that is magical with your ranged character, and you don't really get a whole lot of that until more towards the end game. There are a lot of things in the Slayer side that we skipped over, certainly, and you can use a lot of this for, there's typically some magic creature in here somewhere that you can use it with, but they're few and far between in some of these. Like there's like one monster here. There's none in this. Penumbra's only got one. So there's not a whole lot. And even some of the ones that are in here, like these stone snakes, they drop nothing you're really going to care about. If you're on hardcore combat only, you might need this for something. Don't know. Or if you're an adventurer and you're trying to get some of this material built up, I don't know. Speedrun mode, it depends. There's a lot of different ways we can go from there. But that's typically how I level up my ranged character, and I hope this has been helpful. We're going to have one more for magic, and that one's, I don't know how I'm going to do that one yet, because magic is all over the place. There's a lot of things you can do with magic. a lot of ways to level up, a lot of gear you can use, and it's kind of similar to this in Melee, but it's a little different because you've got runes and all the other stuff you have to deal with. So anyway, that will do it for this one. We will catch you on the next one. Take care.